She traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger. He took one look at her and said, "No, this will not do at all." Marion Cross stood on that train platform in her very best dress, holding on to the last shred of hope she had left. The marriage agency had promised her a new life. Instead, she got 3 words that destroyed everything. The arrangement is canceled. Then someone stole her last $8. For 3 days, she wandered that Wyoming town with no food, no money, and no one who would help. She slept behind buildings like a stray dog. And when 2 men finally cornered her in an alley, offering to solve her problem, she knew exactly what kind of life they were selling. That is when a wagon appeared out of nowhere. A widower with 4 motherless children looked at her and said 4 words that changed everything. "You are coming home." What happens when your worst nightmare leads you to your greatest blessing? What happens when a woman who was treated like she was worth nothing discovers she was worth everything to the right people? This is a story about rock bottom and the hands that pull you back up. Your darkest moment is not the end of your story. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find where you truly belong. Real family is not about blood. It is about who chooses you and keeps choosing you every single day. If you believe the right people will find you at the right time, stay until the very end, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. My story began in the punishing summer heat of Wyoming. I sat behind the Silver Spur Inn, clutching the only thing I owned, a small bag with 2 dresses and my mother's Bible. It had been 3 long days since I stepped off that train, my heart pounding as I searched for a man I knew only from a photograph. His name was Silas Petong. He took one long, hard look at me and said, "No, this will not do at all." The memory was a sharp pain. I had worn my very best dress, and the agency had promised him a wife of good character. I had traveled nearly 2,000 miles for a new life. Silas did not care. "You are older than your picture," he said, his voice like ice, "and much too thin. I was promised a robust woman." I just stood there on the platform, completely stunned. I told him I was 26, just as I had written. "The arrangement is canceled," he said, turning his back on me. I begged him, telling him how far I had traveled. He just looked at me with cold eyes and said, "The agency will handle your return." Then he climbed into his carriage and was gone. My future turned to dust right there on that platform. I should have bought a ticket back east, back to my lonely life, but I could not do it. Going back meant total defeat, and I was too tired and too proud to run. So I walked into town hoping to find a room and figure out what to do. I went to the Silver Spur Inn. Behind the counter, a woman with steel-gray hair barely looked up from her book. "A room is $1.50 a night, paid in advance," she said. I reached into my bag for my purse, but it was gone. My hands started to shake as I searched everywhere. It had been there on the train, holding my last $8.35. Someone had stolen it. The woman showed no pity. "Happens all the time," she said flatly. I pleaded with her, offering to work as a seamstress to pay my way. She just shook her head. "I need paying customers, not another mouth to feed. You are on your own." Every door in that town was closed to me. A boarding house owner told me to try the saloon. The man there looked me over with a greasy smile that made my skin crawl, and I knew what kind of work he was offering. I walked right back out. No one at the general store or the church needed help. Without money or a friend in the world, I was completely invisible. By the second day, a deep hunger set in, the kind that makes your whole body tremble. I spent that night behind the blacksmith shop with my bag as a pillow. There was no hope of finding food, and the emptiness in my stomach was a constant gnawing ache. On the 3rd day, I ended up back behind the inn, too weak to move. The sun was setting, but I was too tired to care. I just leaned against the wall, feeling my strength fade away. I drifted off, not hearing the footsteps until they were right on top of me. "See? Told you she would be here," a voice said. My eyes fluttered open to see 2 men standing over me. One was young and smelled of whiskey. The other was older, dressed well, with a look in his eye that chilled me to the bone. And then I recognized him. It was Franklin Morris, the very agent who had arranged my marriage to Silas Peaton. A cold deeper than the evening air settled on Marion Cross. "Miss Cross," a man named Morse said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I heard about your little problem." Marion tried to stand, but her body wouldn't listen. Morse edged closer, a younger man trailing him like a stray dog. "I've gone and found a solution for you." His tone sent a shiver down her spine. "This here is Tommy Vickers. He's a good fella from the cattle yards looking for a wife." The younger man, Tommy, stared at her with a hungry look that made her skin crawl. Morse continued, "Tommy's willing to take you on, no questions asked." Marion found her voice. "I'm not looking for another arrangement." "You need a husband and a roof over your head," Morse snapped. "That's why you came here." Tommy stumbled forward, the stink of whiskey filling the air. "She's a pretty little thing," he slurred. "I am not interested," Marion said, her voice shaking but firm. Morse's fake kindness vanished. "You don't have a choice. You have no money, no job, and nowhere to go. How long you reckon you'll last alone?" He pulled a paper from his coat. "You signed a contract to marry. It doesn't say who. Tommy here is willing to take his place." "That contract was with another man," she argued. "Doesn't matter. You either marry him or you pay the agency fee. That'll be $45. $45. It might as well have been $1 million. "I don't have it," she whispered. "I know," Morse said with a slick grin. "That's why Tommy's offer is a blessing. He'll pay your debt and give you a home. All you have to do is be his wife." "No," she said. Just then Tommy's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, yanking her up. "Don't be a fool. You're nothing. Take what you're given." "Let go of me," she cried. "You heard the lady." The voice was calm and steady, coming from the shadows. A wagon had quietly rolled into the alley, blocking their only way out. A tall, broad-shouldered man was climbing down. He wore dusty clothes and a hat that shadowed his face, but there was no mistaking the hard line of his jaw. In the back of the wagon, 4 small children sat watching with wide, silent eyes. "This is private business, friend," Morse said, his voice tight with anger. "Doesn't look private to me," the stranger said, walking toward them. "Looks like a lady in trouble. She has an obligation." "The lady said no," the stranger repeated, his voice dangerously low. "I heard her say it twice. That seems mighty clear to me." Morse's face turned bright red. The stranger ignored him, stooping to pick up Marion's spilled belongings. He gently placed them back in her bag. Then he looked right at Marion. "You got somewhere to go, ma'am?" Her voice was a bare whisper. "No." He nodded, then took off his own coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm and smelled of honest work. "Well, you do now," he said, offering his hand. "Come on. You're coming home with us." She took his hand and he easily pulled her to her feet. "You can't just take her," Morse sputtered. "She owes money." "Send me the bill," the man said, never taking his eyes off Marion. "Lucas Hart Ranch, about 12 miles north of town. You got a problem, you come see me there. This is kidnapping." "This is helping a lady who needs it," Lucas said, his gaze finally turning to stone as he looked at Morse. "Something you clearly weren't fixing to do." "Now my kids are hungry and this lady needs a hot meal," Lucas said, ending the discussion. He guided Marion to the wagon. "Evan," he called to the oldest boy, "make some room back there." The boy scooted over without a word. Lucas lifted Marion into the wagon as if she weighed nothing at all. "You'll be all right?" he asked. She could only nod. He handed her the bag, climbed back into the driver's seat, and with a soft click of the reins, they were moving. Marion dared one look back. Morse and Tommy were just shadows in the alley, their faces twisted in fury. Then the wagon turned the corner, and they were gone. Surrounded by 4 quiet children with a stranger's warm coat around her, Marion felt a dam inside her finally break. Tears she had refused to shed now streamed down her face. The little girl, no older than 5, scooted closer and leaned against her. "Don't you cry," she said in a tiny voice. "Pa always makes things better." Marion hugged the small child, her heart aching with a feeling she hadn't felt in a very long time. As the wagon rolled out of Bridger Falls and into the wide-open country, she watched the sunset paint the sky. She had no idea who Lucas Hart was or why he had saved her. She only knew that for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't scared. She felt a flicker of hope. And as they traveled into the growing darkness, Marion allowed herself to believe that her story was not over. Maybe, just maybe, it was about to begin. It was. Marion sat in the back of a wagon with 4 quiet children. The oldest boy, Evan, had a stubborn jaw just like his father, Lucas. The younger boys, Miles and Caleb, whispered and watched her. A little girl named Rose, who was just 5 years old, leaned against her side. Her dress was mended with care, and her hair was braided neatly. "My mama is gone now," Rose stated, plain as day. The simple truth of it hit Marion hard. She realized then that all these children had already known great loss. After the boys bickered for a moment, Evan quieted them with a single word. Rose looked up at Marion and asked, "Are you going to live with us now?" Marion truly did not know what to say. Evan spoke without looking at her. "My pa does not do things without a reason. If he brought you, he meant to." As they rode on under a sky full of stars, something in Marion's spirit began to settle. This wide-open country felt like a place where she could finally breathe again. At long last, Lucas turned the wagon toward a warm light in the distance. "We are almost home," he called out. The place was a proper ranch, solid and well-kept. Lucas lifted a sleeping Rose from the wagon and sent the boys to tend to the horses with quiet orders. He looked at Marion, saw the deep exhaustion on her face, and just nodded toward the house. Inside, the house was simple, but it felt like a real home. "You'd better sit down before you fall over," Lucas said gently. He started making a meal without any fuss. When he asked how long it had been since she ate, Marion admitted it had been at least 2 days. A muscle in his jaw tightened, but he just set a plate of bread, cheese, and chicken in front of her. To Marion, it looked like a banquet. "Eat slowly now," he advised her. That simple food tasted like the best meal of her life. The boys came in and they all ate together. No one pushed her for answers or made her feel unwelcome. They just shared a meal like it was the most natural thing in the world. Afterwards, they cleaned up as a team. The quiet, steady rhythm was a comfort Marion had not felt in a long, long time. "I have a spare room," Lucas Hart told her, his voice steady. "It was for storage, but it has a bed. You can have it for tonight." Marion felt a lump form in her throat. "I have no way to pay you, sir. I have nothing left." He shook his head. "I am not asking for payment. I am asking if you need a safe place to sleep. It seems to me the answer is plain." He led her to a simple room with a clean bed and a lamp already glowing warmly. "The washroom is down the hall. My boys and I are up early, but you sleep in as long as you need." She clutched her worn bag. "Mr. Hart." "Lucas, why are you doing this for a stranger?" "You are a person who needs help," he said plainly. "That is all I need to know." After he closed the door, Marion finally let herself break. She collapsed on the bed and wept for the first time in 3 long days. She cried for the shame of being rejected as a mail-order bride, for the thief who took her last dollar, and for the awful men who had cornered her in town. But tears of relief followed, because for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. She had a roof over her head and a lock on her door. Tonight, that was more than enough. She eventually washed her face, changed, and slipped into the clean sheets. Under a sky full of stars, Marion slept without fear. Morning arrived with the sounds of a working ranch. She found the kitchen empty, but a plate of warm eggs, bacon, and toast was waiting on the table with a kind note. Marion was still savoring the food when Lucas walked in. He poured a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "Did you sleep all right?" he asked, his back to her. "Yes, thank you for everything." He turned, leaning against the counter. He motioned to the table. "We should probably talk." Marion's stomach tightened. Of course. Lucas looked into his coffee cup for a moment. I will not ask you for your story. That is yours to keep or to share. But I do need to know if any trouble is likely to follow you here. I am not a criminal, she said quickly. I came as a mail-order bride. The man, Silas Peaton, sent me away. Then I was robbed. An agent named Franklin Morse tried to force me into another deal with a terrible man to pay a debt. A shadow crossed Lucas's face. Morse is bad news. He's been looked at for tricking women before. Morse claims I owe his agency $45. That contract was with Peton, Lucas explained. And you cannot be forced into a marriage to pay a debt. That is not the law. Morse was just trying to scare you. He set his cup down. Here is my offer. You can stay here and help with the house and my children for as long as you need. It would be an honest job. No debts between us. When you are ready to move on, I will see to it you have the money for your passage. Marion was stunned. Why would you do this? My wife, Sarah. She passed on 2 years back, he said softly. Since then, it has just been me and the kids. My boy Evan helps, but at 13 he should not have to raise his siblings. I need help and you need a safe place. It seems simple. I am trusting my gut, and my gut tells me you are a good person who has had a string of bad luck. Before she could find words, 2 young boys burst in. Pa, the south fence is down again, Miles shouted. Lucas sighed and stood up. All right, boys, let us get the tools. He looked at Marion. You just get settled in today. We can talk more this evening. He left, and Marion began to wash the breakfast dishes, needing something to do with her hands. A small girl with sleepy eyes, his daughter Rose, padded into the kitchen. You are still here, she said. Marion smiled. I am. Your father said I could stay and help. The little girl looked at her seriously. Are you going to be our new mama? No, sweetheart, Marion answered gently. I am just here to help your pa around the house. We're getting along just fine on our own, he said. Marion just smiled. I reckon you are. Now, let's get you dressed and find some breakfast. Rose took her hand, trusting as a puppy, and led her to the room she shared with her brothers. It was tidy, with beds made and toys put away. After helping Rose into a simple dress, they went back to the kitchen. Marion hadn't felt so useful in a long, long time. The men came in for lunch, dusty and hungry as wolves. Evan watched her from the corner of his eye, not mean but not friendly either. He was waiting to see what she was made of. Rose took her to the barn, which smelled sweet like hay and horses. In a quiet corner, a mama cat nursed 5 tiny kittens. Rose pointed them out, saying, That one's Patches, and that's Socks. Marion sat in the hay, and the little girl put a kitten in her lap. Mama loved cats, Rose said softly. She said they were good company when you're lonely. Do you get lonely? Marion looked down at the tiny, warm body in her hands. Sometimes, she admitted. Rose leaned her head on Marion's shoulder. Me too. For a moment, the child who'd lost so much was the one giving comfort. That evening, Lucas asked her to walk with him. The air was cool and pleasant as they leaned against a pasture fence. You surely kept yourself busy today, he said. Rose thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread. He got quiet for a moment. She's a sweet girl, but she's lonely. It's been hard on her, being the only girl in a house full of men. He looked her straight in the eye. I meant what I said. This ain't charity. I'm offering you a job, room and board, and a wage when I can manage it. As for those men, you let me worry about 'em. Bullies like that are cowards at heart. He's all talk. He will make a lot of noise, but in the end he will fold. Marion hoped that was true, but promises had failed her before. What if he does not? She asked. Lucas looked at her, his face serious. Then I will make it clear that you are under my protection. Any man who tries to force you will face me. I am not a violent man, Miss Cross, but I defend what is mine. On this ranch, you are mine to defend. His words felt like a shield. Thank you, she whispered. As the sun set, she asked, Tell me about your wife. He was quiet for a long time. Sarah was a force of nature, he finally said. She was a small woman, but fierce. When we met, I had nothing but big dreams. She believed in me. We built this ranch from the ground up, just us and little Evan. Then the other children came. Sarah loved this life. When the fever took her, he paused, swallowing hard. It broke all of us. The children lost their whole world. Life does not ask for permission before it takes. He pushed off the fence. But sometimes it gives you things you do not expect. Like a woman who can bake bread showing up just when your family is tired of biscuits as hard as rocks. Marion had to laugh. Your biscuits were that bad? Evan said they were rocks. I think he was being kind. As they walked to the house, she felt a quiet peace settle in her heart. 3 days passed with a comfortable rhythm. Marion cooked, cleaned, and looked after the house while Lucas and the boys worked. Evan became less suspicious. Miles and Caleb decided she was fine after she helped them build a lizard trap. Little Rose was now her shadow, always chattering beside her, and Lucas was a steady, quiet presence. She saw him watching her sometimes with a look she could not understand. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Marion was hanging laundry when 2 riders approached. Her stomach turned to ice when she recognized Franklin Morse and Tommy Vickers. Her hands froze on a wet sheet. Rose sensed her fear. "Who is that?" "Go inside, Rose," Marion said softly. "Find your father. Now, please." The urgency in her voice sent Rose running. The men dismounted. Morse's smile was cold. "Miss Cross, I figured I would find you here." "Mr. Morse," she said, her voice steady. "What do you want?" "I want you to honor your contract." Mr. Piton voided that agreement. "The agreement was with my agency," Morse said, pulling out a paper. "And Tommy here is willing to take Mr. Piton's place." "I am not interested," Marion said. Tommy Vickers stepped closer. "You do not have a choice. You owe money, and I am offering to pay it. That makes you mine." "I am not yours," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am not marrying you." "You think you can hide here on this ranch?" Morse's voice grew sharp. "Playing house with a widower and his kids? Lucas Hart is not going to protect you forever." "The reality," a calm voice said from behind her, "is that she is employed here, doing honest work, and she does not owe you a thing." Lucas walked toward them, Evan right behind him. The boy's hands were balled into fists. Morse scowled. "Hart, this is not your business." "It is my ranch and my employee. That makes it my business," Lucas said, stopping beside Marion. "Now it is time for you to leave." "We are not leaving without her," Tommy insisted. "She does not owe you anything," Lucas cut in. "That piece of paper is worthless. You can try taking it to a judge, but you will not. You know exactly how that would turn out." Morse's face grew red. "You cannot just keep her here." "She is free to leave whenever she wants," Lucas said. "But she is choosing to stay. If you have a problem with that, we can talk to Sheriff Dawson. I am sure he would be interested in how you force women into marriage to settle debts." The sheriff's name made Morse hesitate. Lucas pressed on. "In fact, why don't we all ride into town right now? I bet he would love to hear about all the women you place with men they never agreed to marry, the ones who face threats when they try to leave." "That is slander," Morse spat. "It is the truth," Lucas's voice was like ice. "You have gotten away with this for years because your victims are too afraid to fight. But Miss Cross is not alone anymore. She has us," Evan's young voice rang out, clear and strong. "You will have to go through all of us." Morse looked from Lucas to the boy, weighing his chances. Finally, he spit on the ground. "Fine, keep her." "I will," Lucas said. Morse grabbed Tommy's arm and they rode away in a cloud of dust. Marion trembled with relief. When they were gone, she turned to Lucas. "Thank you." "You do not need to thank me for doing what is right," he said softly. Are you all right?" "I am now." She looked at Evan. "Thank you, too." The boy shrugged, a blush creeping up his neck. Pa was right. You are part of this ranch now. We look out for our own. At his words, something warm bloomed in Marion's chest. She had forgotten what it felt like to belong somewhere. "I should finish the laundry," she said, her voice a little shaky. Rose ran out from the house and hugged her tight. "I was scared," the little girl said. "Me too," Marion whispered, holding her close. "But it is all right now. Your father made it all right." That evening, after the children were asleep, Lucas found her on the porch, rocking in a chair and looking up at the endless Texas stars. Later, he found her rocking on the porch. "Think they'll be back?" she asked, her voice small. "No, ma'am," Lucas said, sitting in the other rocker. "And if they do, the answer's the same. You're under my protection now." The words hung in the quiet air. "Why are you doing all this?" He turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. "Because I saw your strength. You got dealt a bad hand but refused to fold. That's a rare thing. Besides," he added with a small smile, "Rose has decided you're staying, and what she says usually goes." In that moment, Marion felt a flicker of real hope. The days that followed settled into a peaceful rhythm. She learned the ways of the ranch, from Lucas's early mornings to the boys' breakfast antics. The work was honest, and it healed a part of her she hadn't known was broken. For the first time in forever, Marion wasn't just running from something. She was finally starting to feel like she was home. The Wyoming wind felt different now, carrying the scent of a future she might actually want to fight for. One crisp October morning, Evan shuffled into the kitchen. He stood there for a spell, looking as awkward as a calf on ice. "Ma used to make apple pie this time of year," he mumbled. "There's some wild ones down by the creek. I was thinking maybe we could go pick some." It was the first time he'd said more than 2 words to her all on his own. It was an olive branch. "I'd like that very much," Marion said, her voice soft. That afternoon, they all went down to the creek, with the little ones running ahead. The autumn air was clean, and the cottonwood trees were pure gold. Marion walked alongside Evan in a comfortable quiet. He led her to a stand of gnarled apple trees. He pointed up, saying his mama Sarah always said the small tart ones made the best pies. Evan explained that bigger apples were just too soft and sweet. He handed one to Marion, and she turned it over in her hand. "Your mother sounds like a wonderful woman," she said. He just nodded. Evan said, "Folks say I take after her. Good with my hands." "You work harder than most men I know," she replied. Evan looked pleased. After a bit, he turned to her, his young face dead serious. "Are you going to stay?" Her hand froze midair. "Your father said I could." "That is not what I asked," Evan said flatly. "People say things, but then they leave. After Ma died, her friends all disappeared." The hurt in his voice was a palpable thing. Marion looked him square in the eye. "I cannot promise forever," she said, "because life does not work that way. But I can promise you this. Being here with your family is the first time in years I have felt like I belong somewhere. And if I ever leave, it will not be because I wanted to." Evan studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "That helps," he said. That evening, the whole ranch house smelled of cinnamon and apples from Sarah's recipe. When Lucas took his first bite of pie, he closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were shining. "Just like Sarah's," he said quietly. "Thank you," he added. Later, on the porch, Lucas spoke first. "Evan told me what you said to him. He needs that kind of honesty. He has been let down too many times. After Sarah passed, her own folks promised they would stay in his life. They lasted about 6 months before saying it was just too hard. People remember who stays and who leaves," Lucas said, his voice low. "And they are watching you, Marion, to see which one you will be." The use of her first name was a surprise. It felt like a line had been crossed. "I meant what I told Evan," she said. "I'm not planning on leaving. Lucas, I had nothing back in Philadelphia, no family, no one. I was so alone I answered a stranger's ad just for a chance to matter to someone. Then you came along. You gave me a place, a purpose. So, no, I am not looking for something better. I do not think anything is better than this." Lucas was quiet for a spell. Then he said, "You matter here." Before she could answer, the sound of a horse pounding down the road shattered the night. A single rider was coming in fast. Lucas tensed, then relaxed a bit. "That is James Thornton from the next ranch over. Something is wrong." James Thornton swung down from his horse, his face grim. "Lucas," he said, "Franklin Morse was in the saloon tonight, running his mouth. He is filing a complaint with the judge, claiming you are interfering with a business contract concerning a woman's debts." Lucas's jaw went tight. "He is bluffing. There is no contract." "Maybe," Thornton said, "but he has got Tommy Vickers and a few others to back his story. Judge Morrison tends to side with business. If Morse plays it right, the judge might just rule in his favor." "What does that mean?" Marion asked, a cold fear creeping in. "It means there will be a hearing," Thornton replied. "If the judge sides with Morse, you might have to pay the debt or honor that contract." After Thornton rode off, the peace of the evening was gone. "I am sorry," Marion said. "I have brought you nothing but trouble." "You have brought laughter back into this house," Lucas said, his voice firm. "Morse is the trouble, not you. And on Monday, we are going to prove it." The next 3 days were filled with a quiet dread. Lucas was busy preparing, though he would not share the details. Sunday evening, he gathered the children. "Tomorrow, Miss Marion and I have to go to town," he explained calmly. "Mr. Morse is telling lies to a judge. We are going to go tell the truth." "What if the judge makes her leave?" Rose asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas's voice was firm. "He won't. But listen up. We're a family, and we look after our own. Marion is our own now. Y'all understand?" Later that night, Marion found Lucas in the kitchen. "I can't sleep," she admitted. "Lucas, if we lose, don't let them force you into anything. Let me handle the debt." Lucas stacked his papers neatly. "I've been looking at this all wrong. This ain't about contracts, Marion. It's about control. Morse preys on desperate women. He makes them feel like they have no choice. You're a threat because you said no. You found a better way. If you can get away," he continued, "then other women might get the same idea. And that puts a real dent in his business." A heavy weight settled on Marion, but instead of crushing her, it felt like a shield. Lucas was right. This was bigger than just her. "Then we won't lose," she said, her voice steady. The next morning, Marion put on her best dress. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman, not property, just someone trying to live her life. The wagon ride to town was quiet. The kids had hugged her so tight, and she promised them she would be back. She planned on keeping that promise. The courthouse was already packed, the air thick with whispers. Inside, Judge Morrison, a stern man with iron-gray hair, sat behind a high desk. Morse and Tommy Vickers were at one table with their lawyer. Lucas led Marion to the other. "Lucas, we don't have a lawyer," she whispered, her heart pounding. "The truth doesn't need a hired tongue to speak for it," he said calmly. The judge called the hearing to order, laying out Morse's complaint that Marion had broken a marriage contract. "Mr. Morse," the judge said, "you may present your case." Morse's lawyer stood up, slick as a snake in the grass. He painted a picture of Marion as a dishonest woman who used his client's services and then backed out of her obligations. He showed the contract and receipts. He argued that since another man, Mr. Vickers, was willing to marry her, she was still bound by the agreement. Her refusal, he concluded, was a clear violation. Judge Morrison listened, his face like stone. When the lawyer finished, the judge turned his gaze to their table. "Mr. Hart, you have the floor." Lucas stood tall. "Your Honor, with all due respect, what we just heard is a tall tale. First, the contract was with one man, Silas Peaton. When he rejected Miss Cross, he broke the deal, not her. Second, the agency didn't hold up its end. They abandoned her." Lucas pulled papers from his coat. "I have a statement from the sheriff about thefts targeting newcomers. I also have testimony from 3 other women who this agency put in terrible situations. As for Mr. Vickers, he ain't generously offering a thing. He's trying to buy a wife, and the public record shows he has 2 assault complaints against him in the last 18 months. A shock went through the room. Lucas turned to Marion, his voice softening. The real issue here is exploitation. Mr. Morse profits from fear. Miss Cross is here because she refused to be a victim. She sat in an alley for 3 days with no food or money rather than accept a life she knew was wrong. That is not a breach of contract, Your Honor. That is strength of character. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Morse. After a few sharp questions that made Morse squirm, the judge slammed his gavel down. I have heard enough. The contract is null and void. Miss Cross owes you nothing. In the courtroom, the judge's voice cut through the air. He declared the agency had failed Marion and that she did not owe a single cent. He even ordered an investigation into their crooked business. When the gavel fell, it was all over. The judge looked directly at Marion. I hope you found a better situation for yourself, ma'am. With Lucas standing by her side, Marion smiled. I surely have, Your Honor. Standing on those courthouse steps, she finally felt the heavy weight lift. She was free. When Lucas came up beside her, Marion just turned and wrapped her arms around him. He froze for a second, then held her tight. Thank you for standing up for me, she whispered. Always, he said, his voice low. She did not mind the folks staring. For the first time in a long while, she could finally draw a full breath. The ride home felt easy. The air cleared between them as they made small talk about supper and fences. The second they reached the house, the kids poured out. Rose jumped into Marion's arms, hollering, You came back! Of course I did, sweet girl. I promised. Evan hung back, trying to act tough, but the relief in his eyes was plain as day as he gave her a small, genuine smile. Have you ever felt like you were running from a nightmare only to find yourself in a place you never expected? That was Marion. She had escaped a terrible injustice, finding shelter with a quiet rancher named Lucas and his 4 kids. But being safe is not the same as being home. This story is about how a woman who had lost everything found the courage to fight for a family she was just starting to love. It goes to show that your real strength is not revealed until everything you care about is on the line. Stick around to see how it all unfolds. The fear that had been her shadow for so long was finally gone, replaced by a quiet peace. The work on the ranch was hard, turning her soft hands calloused and strong. But it was good work, the kind that mattered. The children, of course, tested her boundaries. Miles and Caleb brought a snake in the house, and she calmly took the creature outside and put the boys on laundry duty for a week. Little Rose would ask heart-wrenching questions at bedtime, like if Marion wished she had different children. Marion would just pull her close and say, Sweetheart, you are as real as it gets, and I would not trade you for anything in this world. But it was the oldest, Evan, who tested her the most with his quiet watchfulness. He was a 13-year-old boy carrying the weight of a grown man. One evening she found him in the barn struggling with a book. He was frustrated, admitting his pa, Lucas, was too busy to help him with the difficult words. What if you bothered me instead? Marion offered gently. He looked at her with suspicion, but then handed over the book. From that night on, it became their ritual. They would sit at the kitchen table while she helped him, and soon the other children would gather around just to listen. One cold November evening, a neighbor brought bad news. The Harrove family's barn had burned down, and they had lost all their winter feed. Lucas did not hesitate. I will be there, he said, telling Evan to get ready to leave with him at dawn. They would likely be gone for 3 or 4 days. After the neighbor left, Lucas turned to Marion. Can you manage here with just the little ones? He asked. Of course, she said, trying to hide the flicker of anxiety she felt. We will be fine. But trouble has a way of showing up when you least expect it. A man named Vickers, an old enemy, showed up the next day. He walked right up to the porch, his eyes full of menace, thinking he could scare her. Marion's heart pounded, but she stood tall in the doorway with Lucas's rifle held steady in her hands. You are not welcome here, she said, her voice shaking only a little. Get off this land. Vickers saw she was not bluffing. He saw a mother protecting her young. He spit a few threats and then rode off. The moment he was gone, Marion pulled the sobbing children into a tight hug. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But being brave means doing what you have to do, even when you are scared." Some folks figure a woman alone is an easy mark. They see a quiet ranch and think there is nobody home to protect it. Well, they have another thing coming. This story is about finding the grit you never knew you had, and it reminds us that true strength is not about the noise you make, but the ground you refuse to give. Marion knew Lucas had to leave for a few days, but watching his wagon disappear down the road left the place feeling mighty empty. He had made sure she knew how to handle the rifle, telling her any woman alone on a ranch needed to protect her own. She was touched by his worry, but also felt a strange sense of power. For the first time, she was truly in charge of these 3 children and this land. It was a heavy weight, but it fit her shoulders just fine. The next 2 days were a trial by fire. First, one of the horses came down with colic. Marion spent 2 long hours walking that poor animal, just like Lucas had taught her, until the spell passed. No sooner had she cleaned herself up than young Caleb took a tumble from the hayloft. Her heart leaped into her throat, but she kept a calm voice. After a gentle look, she figured his arm was just a bad sprain, not a break. She doctored him up with salve and clean wrappings, earning a quiet compliment from the boy. "You are good at this," he had said, "taking care of people." Those words warmed her more than any praise from a grown man ever could. She was doing more than earning her keep. She was proving she belonged. The third morning brought a cold gray sky and the smell of snow. As they were stacking the last of the firewood, a rider appeared down the road. It was their neighbor, James Thornton, and he had a serious look on his face. He asked if Lucas was around, and when Marion said no, he asked to speak with her inside. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. Once the children were sent off to gather eggs, Mr. Thornton took off his hat and got right to the point. "There is trouble in town," he said. "That swindler Franklin Morris was finally arrested for fraud. The law figured out he was taking money for all sorts of promises he never kept." Marion felt a wave of relief. "That is good news, is it not?" "Mostly," Thornton said, shifting his weight. "But a fella named Tommy Vickers is making trouble. He claims he paid Morris $200 for your placement. Now that Morris is in jail, Vickers says he is owed you or his money back." Marion's blood ran cold. "That is absurd. I never agreed to that." "I know it, and the law knows it," Thornton assured her. "But Vickers is a drunk and he is making threats. The sheriff wanted you to be warned." After Thornton left, a heavy silence settled over the house. The children could feel her unease, and the day passed in a hush. That evening, as dusk was settling, she heard it, the sound of several horses moving fast. Without a word, she pointed the children upstairs. "Go to your room, lock the door, and do not come out until I say so." Her tone left no room for argument. She walked to the pantry and pulled out the Winchester rifle. Her hands were steady as she loaded it. Peeking through the window, she saw 3 men ride into the yard. The one in the middle was Tommy Vickers, drunk and swaying in the saddle. He bellowed her name, his words slurred, but his meaning clear as day. Marion opened the front door just enough to be heard, keeping herself behind it. "Mr. Vickers, you are trespassing. Please leave now." Vickers just laughed, an ugly sound. "Or what? You gonna make me?" "Me and this rifle," she answered, her voice as calm as a summer pond. "Mr. Hart taught me to be a very good shot. I will protect this property and these children. You need to leave." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind. Vickers stared at the determined woman in the doorway, then back at the rifle she held so steadily. One of his friends muttered something urgent, and the fight seemed to drain right out of Vickers. He shot her a hateful glare before pulling his horse around. "This is not over," he snarled. "Oh, yes, it is," Marion said softly. They rode off into the night. Marion finally lowered the rifle, her hands now starting to shake. A small voice came from the stairs. "Miss Marion?" She turned to see 3 pale but brave little faces. "It is all right," she said, her voice full of warmth as she gathered them into her arms. "They are gone. Everything is all right." When Lucas and Evan returned the next afternoon, he saw the look on her face and knew something was wrong. After Marion told him everything, his expression grew dark. But then he looked at her with a surprising softness. "You did exactly right," he said quietly. You kept the children safe. I am proud of you." And hearing those words, Marion felt something settle deep in her soul. The past was finally behind her. She was not just safe anymore. She was home. And for the first time, she was ready for whatever came next, right there on that Texas ranch. Later that night, Lucas rode into town and came back looking pleased. "The sheriff has Vickers," he said. "He will be in jail for a few days, and when he gets out, there is a court paper keeping him away from this ranch, and from you." Marion finally let out a long, shaky breath. "Stop thanking me," Lucas said gently. "You are family. We look after our own." Those words, "you are family," stuck with her. After that, things truly changed. The children did not just tolerate her, they started to love her. Rose called her Miss Mary, the boys vied for her attention, and even quiet Evan started seeking her out just to talk. One night, Evan asked her, "Do you miss your old life?" Marion thought for a spell. "I miss my friend, Mrs. Chen, but the rest of it, that was just surviving, not living." Evan nodded. "Ma used to say the same thing. She said living was about finding joy in the day." He looked right at her. "She would have liked you." Those simple words meant the world to Marion. When the first snow fell, blanketing the whole world in white, it felt like a fresh start. The children whooped with joy, running outside to play in the crisp air. Lucas joined her on the porch, handing her a warm cup of coffee. "First snow," he said. "Sarah always said it felt like a new beginning." He watched the children. "She would be happy to see them like this. We have done a good job." "We," he repeated, looking at her. "You are as much their parent as I am now." He told her how the children loved her, how Evan even got into a spat in town defending her honor. He told those boys you were family. They all feel that way. "And what about you?" The question just tumbled out of her. "How do you feel?" He turned to look her square in the eye, his voice low and serious. "Marion, I'm starting to think that finding you in that alley was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. You brought something back to this ranch that I thought was gone forever. I want you to stay. Not because we need a hand, but because this family just ain't complete without you." Before she could even catch her breath, little Rose ran up, covered in snow. "Miss Mari, come on, let's make snow angels." The moment was gone, but his words hung in the winter air. Later that night, tucked in her bed, Marion couldn't stop thinking about what he said. How this place, which was supposed to be temporary, had somehow become her home. Underneath the quiet rhythm of their days, a current was running strong. Marion felt it in the way Lucas's gaze would follow her, and in the careful way he never touched her. She felt it in her own heart whenever he smiled. She was falling for him, plain and simple. The truth hit her one night as she watched him patiently teaching Caleb how to whittle a piece of wood. The firelight softened his face, and she knew with a sudden clearness that she could watch him be a father for the rest of her life. The thought didn't scare her. It felt like a comfort. But he'd only ever offered her a job and a safe place to land. Maybe that was all he ever would. Christmas was coming on fast, filling the house with a new kind of spirit. Rose chattered on about her presents, while the boys argued over whether they would get enough snow to go sledding. Even Evan seemed lighter, telling Marion how his ma always made the holiday feel like magic. So Marion set out to bring that magic back. They gathered up pine and holly, stringing popcorn and cranberries for the tree Lucas hauled in. The whole house soon smelled of cinnamon and butter from Sarah's old recipes. Lucas watched it all, his eyes holding a mix of pure joy and old sorrow. One evening, Lucas found her in the kitchen alone. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, "for bringing this back to them. To us." He looked like he wanted to say more, something about her making the ranch a home again, but the words caught in his throat. He just turned and left, leaving Marion to wonder. Christmas Eve came with a biting cold outside, but the house was bright and warm. After a fine supper, Lucas read stories by the tree as the children listened. Rose fell fast asleep right there on Marion's shoulder, a perfect picture of peace. After the children were tucked in, Lucas stood by the tree holding a small wooden star. "Sarah carved this our first Christmas," he said softly, worried that having her things around might bother Marion. She just came closer. "Lucas, she was your wife, and their mother. I could never try to erase her. I am honored to live alongside her memory." Lucas swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "She was an amazing woman," he finally said. "But so are you, Marion." He reached up and hung the little star right at the very top of the tree. "I have to tell you something," Lucas said suddenly. "There is not a right way to say this, so I am just going to say it plain." Marion's heart started to thump against her ribs. He took her hand. "When I found you, I thought I was just doing a good deed. But having you here, it has become so much more than that." He turned to face her fully. "Marry me, Marion. Not because you feel you owe us, but because I have fallen in love with you. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." "I love you too," Marion whispered through her tears. "I did not know if I could, but I do. I love this life we have been building." Then she hesitated. "But Lucas, I am not Sarah." He looked her square in the eye. "I do not want you to be Sarah. I want you to be Marion, the brave, kind woman who taught my son to love reading again. That is who I love." She laughed, a happy, tearful sound. "Then yes, yes, I will marry you." He pulled her in for a gentle kiss, full of promise for all their days to come. Christmas morning was a wonderful storm of torn paper and happy shouts. The children were so excited they did not even see Lucas and Marion standing close, holding hands. But Evan saw. He went still, and a look of real hope crossed his face. "Pa?" he asked quietly. Lucas smiled and squeezed Marion's hand. "Kids, Miss Marion has said yes to marrying me. We would like to become a proper family, if you all agree." For a moment the room was silent. Then Rose shrieked with joy. "I knew it! I told Caleb you were going to be our new mama." Caleb was really smiling, the kind of grin that lit up his whole face. "So we're all in agreement then?" Lucas asked, already knowing the answer. A chorus of yes filled the room. Rose looked up at Marion, her eyes shining. "Can I call you Mama now?" Marion knelt and pulled the little girl into a hug, her own throat tight with feeling. "I would be honored." Caleb looked worried for a second. "But what about our first Ma? Do we have to forget her?" "Never," Marion said, her voice firm. "Your heart is big enough to love you both." Just then, Evan stepped forward and gave Marion a tight hug that surprised everyone. "Thank you," he whispered, "for staying." That night they sat on the porch, wrapped up against the cold. The stars were brilliant in the clear sky. "So when should we do it?" Lucas asked. "The wedding." "Soon," Marion said. "Something simple." "New Year's Day," he suggested. "Start the year off right." And it was perfect. They were married in the little town church with just their children and a few neighbors watching. When Lucas slid a plain gold ring on her finger and promised to love and cherish her, she felt the truth of it settle deep in her soul. They were making official what their hearts already knew. After they went back to the ranch, a family, finally whole. As Marion tucked Rose into bed, the little girl squeezed her hand. "Mama?" "Yes, sweetheart? Are you happy?" Marion smiled. "Happier than I ever knew a person could be." "Good," Rose whispered, "'cause we all love you." Later, Marion went to the room she now shared with Lucas. He was sitting on the bed, looking a little nervous. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said quietly. "A partner, someone to share my life with." "Me neither," she answered, going to him. "When I was in that alley, I thought my life was over. You saved me, Lucas. You reminded me that I was worth something." "You saved me too," he said, kissing her hand. "You made this house a home again." In March, Lucas came back from town with a stack of papers. He gathered everyone in the kitchen. "I did something," he said, spreading the documents on the table. These papers make it official. Marion is the legal mother of all four of you." Evan stared at the formal words on the page, and his eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "So we're a real family now," he said, his voice thick. "Permanent. Forever." "Forever," Lucas promised, looking around at each of their faces. At Evan, who was still just a boy who needed his mother. At the twins, loyal and loving. And at Sweet Rose, who had known from the very start that Marion belonged right here with them. Later, Marion gathered everyone. "I need to say something," she began, her voice a little shaky. "I came here thinking I had to be useful just to have a place, but you all taught me something important." She looked at each of them. "Real family is not a contract. It is about choosing each other every single day, especially when it is hard. You did not just rescue me, you chose me. And you keep on choosing me." Lucas took her hand as the children moved in close, making a tight circle. "So yes," she finished, smiling through tears, "we are a family, a forever family." When spring finally arrived, life felt new and full of promise. One evening, Lucas put his arm around Marion on the porch as they watched the sunset. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "Not a one," she said, leaning against him. "Well, maybe just one. I wish I could tell that scared woman I used to be what was waiting for her, that her worst night would lead to her best life." Lucas nodded. "We both had to walk through some darkness to find this light. We had to lose our way to find each other." As the stars came out, the sound of their children laughing filled the air. This, right here, was home. This was not some storybook dream. This was real, earned with grit and heart, from sharing a life and working side by side. Marion Crossar arrived in Wyoming with nothing but an old bag and a prayer. The world had cast her aside, robbed her, and nearly shattered her spirit. She was treated like she was less than nothing. Then a cowboy said 4 simple words that changed her whole world. "Get up. You are coming home." And she did just that. She got up, and she came home. There she found something more precious than any dream. It was not just a roof over her head. It was a place in hearts that would keep her forever. She had been chosen, and this time the home she found had chosen her right back. That made all the difference.